Donald Trump promises to return America to prosperity through tax cuts, reducing government waste, cutting government regulations, and increasing import taxes. Skeptics believe that this is a recipe for a recession, while advocates hope for a return to American prosperity. So, which will it be? This video will define each of these proposed ideas and postulate how President Trump's economic programs may work. You're watching Reengineering Politics, which provides objective information on political matters so that you can make informed decisions for a better America. If you want to see more videos like this one, please like, share, and subscribe. It's been a trying 5 years for our economy. We shut down our economy due to a pandemic. The government then flooded the economy with cash, leading to record high inflation, and in an attempt to control inflation, the Fed raised interest rates. Both moves ensured grocery and housing prices rose. The national debt is at an all-time high, and we are experiencing record deficit spending in government. The interest on our national debt is high and growing as our government is trying to refinance low-interest debt with new debt at 5 times the cost. Social Security and Medicare are destined to go bankrupt in 2034, and American companies are seeking cheap costs in other countries' economies. Meanwhile, consumer debt is also at an all-time high, pointing to a risk of a rise in bankruptcies if our labor market slows, which it is. All of this gloom and doom has led to Americans saying enough is enough and giving Donald Trump the chance to make our economy great again. Let's start this pipe dream with a hypothetical economy similar to our current economy. I will show you two different economic pictures, the private sector and the federal sector. We'll start with the private sector generating $20 trillion per year in economic output. The federal tax rate on this production is 20%. This results in federal tax revenues of $4 trillion. With government spending at $7 trillion, our government generates an annual deficit of $3 trillion to add to the national debt. Let's consider a tax cut of 5%. Republicans believe that if you cut taxes, tax revenue will increase. Now, this principle is modeled in the Laffer curve developed by economist Arthur Laffer. Let's guess that the private sector output will increase from $20 trillion per year to $30 trillion per year. At $4.5 trillion in tax revenue, the tax revenue did increase, as predicted by Arthur Laffer. This increase in tax revenue will reduce the budget deficit by $500 billion per year. Now let's cut $2 trillion of government waste. This sounds like a very large number until you consider that the United States government is spending over $2 trillion more than it did in 2019. If the economy needs workers and resources, these folks will start contributing to the private sector economy. The private sector will now generate $33 trillion in output. This will increase tax revenues to $5 trillion. With the increased tax revenues and decreased spending, the budget deficit will disappear. If unnecessary regulations are reduced to 50% of what they are today, the private sector can shift regulatory compliance costs to production costs, increasing its output to $36 trillion. This increased output will result in federal tax revenues of $5.4 trillion. With government spending at $5 trillion, the government will now show a budget surplus of $400 billion. With a booming economy, the United States can afford to raise import taxes on cheap products from foreign factories. This added $1 trillion will drive the budget surplus even higher. If the United States keeps this up, they can pay down their debt, reduce interest costs, and relieve inflationary pressure on domestic goods and services. Even though this is a video, I can sense you all rolling your eyes with criticism galore. This overly simplistic step-by-step picture is intended to show you how fiscal conservatives think. As an honest broker, I must poke holes in this pipe dream. The Laffer curve is where we started, and it may be the weakest link in this pipe dream. Arthur Laffer postulated that there is some optimum tax rate. He stated that if the tax rate is 0%, private sector revenue will be very high, but tax revenues will be zero. Likewise, if the tax rate were 100%, revenues would be $0 and tax revenues would also be zero. This means this optimum tax rate exists between 0% and 100%. Reducing the tax rate from 20% to 15% of gross output is arbitrary and it may not increase revenue. A decrease in the tax rate may reduce the taxes collected or at least not increase the income as much as I had predicted in the pipe dream. Most fiscal conservatives think that all government spending is a waste. We don't really know what's wasteful and what's not. The estimate of $2 trillion on my part was taken from statements made by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. That said, I do believe that it's reasonable to match pre-pandemic spending. Government regulations keep the private sector in line when it comes to protecting the environment and playing fair in the free market. When the cost to comply is reallocated to other productive parts of the economy, it will generate additional output instead of causing resistance to producing that output. Even if this reallocation doesn't increase revenue, it can reduce consumer prices. This can also be a positive force in the economy. Import taxes have a mixed influence on the United States economy. On one hand, they can increase the revenue the United States government earns. However, import taxes can create trade wars, reducing revenue by exporters. In a global marketplace, domestic manufacturers will experience increased material import costs, which may reduce overall economic output. I believe that Donald Trump uses import taxation as a negotiating chip to force foreign manufacturers and governments to stop currency manipulation and subsidies of their factories. This allows for fair competition with U.S. manufacturers. In the pipe dream, I pretended that economic output could increase by allowing government resources to be reallocated to the private sector. The private sector requires market demand to put employees or other resources to work to meet that demand. If the demand is lacking, the unemployment rate will rise and the hoped-for economic boom won't materialize. The one item that I left out of this economic pipe dream is the promised deportation of illegal immigrants. There are two economic facets of this move. The first is the cost of deportation. That cost may be reduced to the extent that migrants are being housed, fed, and cared for with government money. For the sake of argument, let's just assume that the cost savings will offset the deportation costs in the near term. The primary impact on the economy is the labor cost of service-based businesses that are receiving less expensive labor than they would with native-born workers. Their labor costs will rise, which means their prices will rise. The need for workers will reduce the unemployment rate. If market demand remains high, inflation will result in the service sector. Most of Donald Trump's ideas will create a protectionist free market. By deporting illegal immigrants and increasing import taxes, the United States is attempting to protect its labor markets from outside competitive influences. Illegal and legal immigrants are a way for service-based companies to dodge higher wage rates. Imported goods from low-wage countries where workers have a lower standard of living are ways that manufacturers dodge higher wages in the United States. Now, this seems attractive for American workers. The United States is attempting to avoid the global free market. This means domestic companies will pay the high wages demanded by labor organizations with little fear of foreign competition. The price of goods will rise. All will be well if wages rise in proportion to the price of the goods and services. Unfortunately, this seldom happens. If higher prices and trade wars reduce market demand for goods and services from American companies, the pipe dream economy ends badly. Donald Trump is one man, and he would need the cooperation of several others to attempt this pipe dream. It may be several years before we can know if such moves were even beneficial. One indicator of whether or not the pipe dream is working is whether our overall economic output is growing in the private sector and our government deficit and debts are shrinking. If the pipe dream does work well, we'll pay down our national debt, reduce interest costs in the federal budget, and create a more self-reliant United States of America. We may even be able to bail out our declining Social Security fund. So maybe it's worth a try. Thanks for watching. I would appreciate it if you like, share, and subscribe to my channel to get notified when I publish new videos. If you'd like to engage in civil political discussions focused on issues instead of personalities, please join my Reengineering Politics Facebook group. I've left a link to the group in the description below. And if you want to explore political issues more deeply than you can in weekly videos, I highly recommend my book, Engineering Unity, A Path to Resolving Political Polarization in the United States. Each chapter highlights relevant political topics, presenting the positions of the left and the right, and a viable compromise between the two. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you return for more political insight that's neither left nor right.